Well, this was inevitable, wasn't it?
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Welcome one and all to the video that was destined to happen at some point, my full critique of the second season of Loki. Since my video on the first season is the most popular video on my channel as of now, it only made sense that a video covering season 2 was decreed to happen by the timekeepers. If you do want to watch the first video, I will pop a link in the description so that way you can check it out if you want. But for everyone else, welcome to the next chapter. I knew a second season of Loki was coming and that a review of it was going to probably happen. And if you know my thoughts about the first season of Loki as well as saw my trailer reaction to season 2, then it is very clear that I was super excited and couldn't wait for this season to come out. And finally it is here and all episodes are out. So, what are my general impressions about it? Well, surprisingly, it didn't emotionally impact me as much as I thought it would. The first season had plot points I heavily disliked to downright hated, but in terms of season 2, I felt mostly neutral to apathetic while watching it. Perhaps this is due to my growing disinterest in the MCU due to the downhill trend it has taken, or just the rapid decline of quality in big budget stuff as a whole. But either way, this surprisingly didn't make me as angry as I was predicting. But emotional impact is not what only matters when it comes to media. How about the story? The consistency and coherence of the show? Did it improve or get worse? Well, sadly, the only way to find out is to dive in. So go ahead, grab your nearest Miss Minutes plushie and hold on to your temp pads because it is time to break down this show and see not only how it holds up, but how it compares to season 1. So let's not waste any more time.
And here we go.
Episode 1 starts off on a zoom-out shot of the statue of Kangi, which leads into Loki being chased by Mobius and TVA hunters. If you recall from the end of the last season, Sylvie pushed Loki through a time door, and it was revealed that this Mobius and B-15 don't know who Loki is. With the reveal of the statue, it is implied that either he went to another timeline/dimension, or he is at a different point in time in the TVA. I don't think the latter is the case because of how the TVA is said to be outside of time and space, but we will see if that still stands. Probably won't. So Loki gets cornered and tries to talk to Mobius, but Mobius says he doesn't know who he is. So Loki jumps overboard and lands in a vehicle that just coincidentally happens to be right under him for him to land on this exact second. Alright, firstly, let us address how confusing this edit and staging is. It shows Loki running off to screen right, but when the camera turns around, it also shows him going off right. Besides this creating confusion for the audience in terms of staging and direction, why was it done this way? Why have him run off to the right of the screen but then turn the camera around to show him going the opposite direction as implied by the camera movement? Just have him run screen left and then turn the camera left to show him jumping off the railing. Also, what a great convenience that a car just so happened to be driving by at the exact point that Loki would fall right into the trunk. If this vehicle was a split second earlier or later, Loki would have hit the ground. By the way, if Loki has no powers in the TVA, does he take fall damage? If he missed the vehicle, would he have died from the fall? Well, that would have been a great end to this show. So, the driver of this vehicle doesn't look where she is going, and the car hits the Kang statue and then rams right into the window of a TVA control room. Oh hey look, it's Casey, the guy who doesn't know what fish are.
What's a fish? How do you not know what a fish is?
And he looks to be listening to, what is that, a Walkman? A cassette player? Are there not any more technologically advanced devices to provide for everyone's listening pleasure here at the TVA? Upgrade to at least an iPod. Loki gets out and just comedically waves at all the people in the room while the car falls but flies away safely. And this time monitor screen thing falls to the ground and cracks it. Don't worry, there's a reason to pointing that out. Loki asks Casey what is going on, but Casey doesn't recognize Loki, similarly to Mobius and B-15 earlier. Loki, I think you should realize that wherever you are not in the TVA you once knew. If Mobius and B-15 didn't know who you were, then what makes you think anyone else here will? The whole giant He Who Remains statue should have given away that you are not in Kansas anymore. So this Casey calls in reinforcements saying that he has the intruder, but then Loki suddenly teleports into present time TVA. What Loki is doing here, as explained in the advertisement for this show, is time slipping, where he is just jumping through random places in time. How is he able to do that in a place where that shouldn't be able to happen? Well, let's hope for a good explanation, but something tells me we're not gonna get it. So now Loki is back to the usual time TVA, and Casey recognizes him. Loki goes up to Casey, telling him something terrible is happening, and turns around to notice the crack in the floor caused by the ball earlier. Loki then realizes that he was in the past and is being pulled through time within the TVA itself. He asks where Mobius and B-15 are, and Casey starts to lead Loki there, but Loki soon then time slips yet again, which leads into our title card, which despite my dislike of the show, yes, this is a pretty nice aesthetic. And like I did with season 1, I will once again compliment the music. It is one of the more appealing aesthetics of the show, and I like the use of the specific instrumentation they chose and also the use of the ticking clock in the songs. We soon cut to Mobius and B-15 looking at the same screen they were looking at the end of last season. B-15 and Mobius say that they are going to let the branches grow and tell everyone the truth about the TVA. Which, speaking of, that is a huge issue with what is going on right now. The timeline is branching at unfathomable rates, and no employee in the TVA seems to be concerned, worried, or freaking out about it. All of their jobs revolve around stopping branches and preserving the sacred timeline. From their perspective, the timeline is in unfathomable amounts of trouble, and everyone here is just acting like it's a normal day at work. Nobody seems to care that the one thing that is not supposed to happen is happening. Remember in season 1 when Sylvie bombed the timeline and all the employees were freaking out, the base went on high alert and a bunch of TVA hunters were going out in huge numbers to stop those branches?
Somebody just bombed the sacred timeline.
Same thing is happening here, except much worse, and nobody is giving a crap.
Why?
They don't know what Mobius and B-15 know. As far as they are concerned, this is the worst thing that can possibly happen, and they just treat it like it's not happening. Is anyone here freaked out at all? No? Okay. So Casey walks by saying that Loki was just here for them but has disappeared.
He disappeared right in front of me.
No, Casey, he disappeared while you weren't looking. I know it's a minor detail, but I feel it's worth mentioning. So then a new character named X5 comes in and asks about Mobius's jet ski fetish. Mobius starts to talk with X5 about jet skis, but X5 interrupts him saying he doesn't care.
Why'd you ask?
General Dox and Judge Gamble would like to see you both in the war room.
That doesn't remotely explain why you asked about the jet skis in the first place, ding dong. So Mobius and B-15 get in the elevator, and just after it closes, Loki appears in front of Casey. How inconvenient. Mobius and B-15 say they are going to talk to the judges and try to convince them of what is really going on and how the TVA really came about. Loki tries to get Mobius's attention, but time slips yet again. Loki enters into the past war room and notices the wall decor of Jonathan Major's faces. Loki takes a look around and notices the recorder device on the wall. He plays it back and hears He Who Remain's voice talking to Renslayer about how she made a difference in the war and would be happy to lead with her. This giving an indication that perhaps He Who Remain's motives may not have been as innocent as he made it once seem, and that Renslayer also may know more about him than she let on. This whole recording doesn't make sense, but I'm going to fully address that later when the context of this conversation is given to us. In the present war room, the council of 2 awake people and 1 sleeping old fart want to know why B-15 gave the order to stop pruning branches. Since when did she do that? Also, how can she do that? As far as I'm aware, she is just a hunter. She doesn't have a position of authority to command something as big as telling the entirety of the TVA to stop pruning branches. Why is everyone in the TVA listening to her orders without question? I do not find it believable she got the entirety of the TVA to stop their whole operation so easily. Anyway, B-15 explains that everyone is a variant, including the judges, that they, including Renslayer, had a life on the timeline, and that every time they have pruned a branch, they have killed endless amounts of people on those branches. This commander does not buy into B-15's story, but the other judge here does. She comes to the realization of the situation and commands that the TVA needs to stop pruning immediately. Well, that would be the only thing you can do at this point anyway, since the branches are past the red line. You can't prune a branch or reset a Nexus event past red line, right? That is the whole point of stopping them before then? Unless that rule is just now forgotten or thrown away for the sake of this plot. Right after the judge gives the order to stop pruning, Loki time slips right into the meeting. He tells Mobius that they found He Who Remains and notices the wall of Jonathan Major's face is missing. So he takes X5's pruning stick. Don't know why you did that, Loki. Would have been easier if you just borrowed B-15's stick rather than taking a risk stealing his. And Loki uses the pruning stick on the wall to reveal the face of the villain. Also, the pruning effect conveniently decides to stop just after Kangi's face is visible. It doesn't disintegrate the entire part of the wall, the entire room, even the entire structure. It just so happened to stop right here because it just does. So Loki tells everyone that this is He Who Remains who created the TVA, and also that Sylvie was going to kill him. Yeah, I think it's safe to say, Loki, she did kill him. So Mobius takes Loki out of the room for a chat while X5 and General Docs have an intimate moment together, I guess. I will say I love B-15's reaction, because that was my exact face seeing this as well. Glad to see B-15 and I are connecting on such an emotionally cringed level. Now Loki and Mobius head to the other room to chat, and Loki, still being anxious and unsettled by what transpired at the Citadel mansion, tells Mobius what happened.
We got to the man at the end of time, and he made sense.
No he didn't. It still makes no sense. If you want to see me explain why, you can watch my video on Season 1 to see me dive into it, because I am not going to get into that can of worms again. Also, Loki, why the heck are you so scared by him? I mean, I would get this if he was something like Thanos or someone more intimidating, but does anyone, audience included, think that Jonathan Majors' performance in the first season was scary in any way? Like, he's trying to be a clown here. How is this intimidating? So Mobius tells Loki to calm down and to focus on what he learned while he was there. Loki points out the Merle and says that war is coming this way. That perhaps he who remains was trying to prevent more of him with the preservation of the sacred timeline and pruning of the branches. But Mobius protests, saying why he wouldn't remember that, and Loki responds saying that he who remains probably wiped his memories more than once. But Mobius just suddenly shifts the conversation from He Who Remains to Loki's disappearing act. Okay. Loki says he was in the past TVA, but Mobius says that can't be because time doesn't work that way here. Luckily for both of them, Loki conveniently does the disappearing and reappearing act right in front of Mobius. By the way, just addressing Mobius's comments, what does he mean to say there's no past TVA? I know it's supposedly stated that time doesn't work the same way here than in, like, the timelines, but, like, what does it mean when the TVA has no past? I mean, there are people here who have memories of meetings they had just a few minutes ago, and you have memories of the TVA's places and locations. You know where the file room is, the cafeteria. I mean, if there is no past, then how are there past memories? And also, if there is no past, how do the time collars work? If those time collars are time-based devices, then how would they work in a place outside of time and space where that past doesn't exist or work here? And also, how would OB be able to know how long it has been since he last saw Mobius? Well, maybe the implication with Loki time slipping just now is establishing that it is no longer true, or that it was never true that the TVA is outside time and space. But that comment by Mobius still makes no sense, even if Loki was never able to time slip. So after seeing Loki disappear and reappear, Mobius says that they need to address this issue quick. Also, if we could secondly address how the heck Loki ended up with these powers in the first place too, that would be great. He just got pushed through a door to the past TVA. Is that all it took for him to get this power magically? Is this like when Monica Rambeau got her powers magically by walking through Wanda's force field? It just works now because magic, everyone. Trust me, it makes sense.
He Who Remains is Tempad, so maybe that's how it's possible.
Oh, really? So they're going to explain away Loki's time-slipping ability just by saying the time door he was pushed through was from Kang's Tempad? That doesn't explain anything. All that explains is that He Who Remains' Tempad has the ability to somehow travel in time in the TVA. That doesn't explain how Loki miraculously got this ability. Oh well, we're just gonna brush it off. We need Loki to have this power for the sake of the plot. What else are we going to do? Provide an actual decent explanation? So Mobius and Loki takes an elevator to the basement area of the TVA. We enter into the workspace of Ouroboros, aka OB, played by the wonderful Ke Huy Quan. Last time I saw him was in another movie about timelines in space.
Very busy today. No time to help you.
Mobius, great to see you again.
Loki, I want to introduce you to
I'm Ouroboros,
Ouroboros,
but he calls me Obi.
yeah.
So I am confused about something here. Are they implying that Mobius had his memory wiped and Obi's memory was not? Or are they just implying that Mobius just doesn't remember because it has been so long? If it's the latter, then that's fine. I'm okay with that. But if it's the former, then that just raises a bunch of questions, such as why would they wipe Mobius's mind but not OB? That would create utter confusion and dysfunction at the TVA if this was widespread. So, to give the benefit of the doubt, I hope that Mobius just doesn't remember because it's been so long rather than this whole mind wiping thing. So while they play this memory joke out and it overstays its welcome, a work order comes in and Obi takes a quick second to fix it. And by fix it, I mean hit the device with a hammer. Yep, the devices that are used to facilitate the most powerful bureaucracy in the MCU gets their devices fixed by Obi hitting it with a hammer in a non-careful comedically visual fashion. Man, I wish every tech problem was that easy to fix. Just
Smash it with a hammer! It's brilliant, 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 I tell you. Genius, I say.
So after Obi gets back into the conversation, Loki disappears again in front of both of them and Obi reveals he knows what this is. time slipping. Mobius asks OB if he can fix that, but he says he can't because it is impossible to time slip in the TVA. We see that Loki has time slipped to sometime in the past in OB's office, and Loki talks with past OB to try to get his help with the time slipping issue.
I know it looked like your friend was time slipping, but it must have been something else because I've never seen anything close to that happen before.
But you have seen this happen before. That's how you know this is time slipping, right? I think you mean to say you have never seen this happen in the TVA before? Because what else would it be? I am going to drum this up to bad word choice by the writers to try to communicate. So after OB says that he has never seen that happen, he starts to recant and say that he suddenly remembers that Loki came to him a long time ago about this exact same problem. This in turn reveals that Loki in the past is affecting his present in real time. Although I must ask, if that is the case, then why did Mobius or Casey not remember past Loki when he showed up? Why would Mobius not remember chasing Loki, or Casey not remember Loki crashing into the office? Now, one reason I heard is because at this point where Loki showed up was a point before the memories got wiped, since Loki was in a time when Kang was known and obviously nobody knows about him in the present. Sure, that could be the case and maybe it is, but if so, it also creates a contrivance. That being that Loki just so happened to time slip at a point that was in the past but not too far back at a point in time before OB got his memory wiped, assuming he has had his memory wiped ever. So either way, this creates a contradiction or a contrivance. By the way, is this really supposed to be happening in real time? As in, while Loki is talking to past OB and Mobius is talking to present OB, this is all happening in unison? I mean, that is what the show is implying whenever OB says no to something but then suddenly remembers, like when Loki came to him about time slipping and remembers making the temporal aura extractor. Except this can't work if this is real time. Why? We'll take the temporal aura extractor. Based on the way this edit is, it is implying that it took past OB quite a bit of time to build that thing. But in the present, OB says that he does not have an extractor, then suddenly remembers he does. This does not line up if both these conversations are happening simultaneously in real time. Past OB can't build that extractor thing as fast as present OB is to remember building it. This probably would have been better if there was no implication that these events are happening simultaneously in real time and just have present OB suddenly remember all that transpired. Also, does the temporal extractor just appear out of nowhere? Does Loki's time slipping allow for other objects to basically teleport? Does that mean if someone built a random wall in the past, would it just randomly appear and someone in the present would be unlucky to run into it? What if that person was standing right in the middle of where that wall would be? Would they magically merge with it, or would they be cut in half? I know these are all hypotheticals, but introducing this somewhat teleportation feature of items through time opens a potential can of worms. What might have been better is if Loki just grabs the extractor here and then just time slips with it to the past. You know, the same way he does in future instances in this series. I also find it convenient that during this whole section that Loki doesn't happen to time slip randomly while past OB is explaining this important information to him. If Loki did time slip randomly, this whole thing would not work.
That makes perfect sense. There's no flaw in that logic.
Yeah, you wish. So after some more time jokes and minor drivel, Loki asks OB how they could remedy this random time slipping. OB says that they first will need a temporal aura extractor, particularly in the period that Loki would want to end up in. Then with that extractor, use it in the temporal loom to pull Loki directly out of the time stream, and that Mobius will need to be quick about it or his skin might be peeled off. But don't worry, that isn't as bad as what Loki has to do, which is apparently prune himself. And why must Loki do this?
Well, when something is pruned, it's released from time. So the hope is that after you prune yourself, the extractor will pull you into the present.
No, I don't think that's how that works. I think this is a complete contradiction from the explanation of what pruning does in Season 1 by Renslayer. In her explanation, she states that it all gets moved to a void at the end of time, a random place on the timeline. It isn't released from time or the timeline, it is simply moved to another place on the timeline where it does not branch.
When we prune a branched reality, it's impossible to destroy all its matter. So we move it to a place on the timeline where it won't continue growing. To a void at the end of time.
So Renslayer and OB are creating contradictions with each other. Also, OB says the hope is that the extractor will pull Loki into the present. What, have you never done this before, OB? We are going to risk Loki being atomically disassembled and Mobius having no skin on basically an untested hypothesis? Yeah, sure, no need to be confident about this, it's just their own lives. So as OB hands them their equipment, the light fixture to OB's right starts to fluctuate. Mobius says that this has been happening all throughout the TVA, and this brings a face of worry onto poor little OB. OB, Loki, Mobius, and B-15 all meet up to go into the temporal loom room. OB says that since the timelines are branching, the temporal loom is being overloaded. Oh, by the way, look at the disclaimer written on the floor there. Likelihood of spaghettification increases 7,000%. So, absolute certainty, right? Like, I get it, this is obviously a comedic gag put on the floor by the creators of the show to make this funny, but it makes no sense in the context of the characters in the actual universe. Like, are the characters in universe supposed to take that literally? Because I don't see how or why you should take that literally. Because if they are supposed to take that exactly how it says, then why would any of them go in there? So inside this magical room is the gates of heaven, implied by how bright it is. Just kidding, it's just the temporal loom. Obi explains that the loom is designed to take raw time and refine it into physical branches, and that it isn't designed to weave those many extra branches, so it's currently being overloaded. Obi suggests that the extra branches need to be pruned and that would stop the meltdown, but B-15 resists, saying doing so would cause the death of countless lives. Obi says he will need to think of a way to retrofit the loom to handle all the extra branches, and while doing so, should close the blast doors to protect the TVA. But before he does that, they need to enact the plan to get Loki to stop his time slipping. A TVA officer comes in and says that Dox and her crew are raiding the armory. B-15 says she will go handle it so Loki and Mobius can focus on their mission. Loki, while talking to Mobius, time slips again and leaves his pruning stick behind. So he time slips not to the past, but the future, and notices he has no time stick to prune himself, so he has to go find one before time runs out. Well, good thing he didn't happen to drop the timer as well, otherwise this show would be over. Back to the present, Obi reminds Mobius of his instructions and comedically tells him the consequences of failure. Yeah, great job tonally making this funny to take away from the seriousness of this situation.
Is this cracked?
Oh, yeah, just fix it with duct tape. No need to grab another helmet, this is just Mobius and Loki's lives we are talking about. Let's just put more unnecessary risk on this mission for no good reason. Does anyone in this situation take any of this seriously? So now Mobius is ready, and the doors open before him, and he hoofs it to the edge of the platform, and then inserts the extractor into the launcher and sets it up ready to be activated. Also, what is that extractor made out of? I only ask because the extractor and this platform aren't being affected by the temporal radiation, so whatever those things are made out of, the TVA should really consider making those suits out of the same material. Also, why does this platform have practically no railings? What, did they deem it unnecessary to not take any precautions to prevent someone accidentally falling into a temporal radiation abyss? I think they're getting their blueprints from the First Order. Loki is still desperately searching for a time stick in this future TVA that looks to be on the verge of collapsing as the temporal loom is near critical overload. He can't seem to find one, and Mobius in the present activates the extractor, turning Loki's timer green. Loki is in shock that he may be lost at time and slowly walks down the hallway after hearing a random phone ring. Cutting quickly back to present time, Obi says they don't have any more time and starts to close the blast doors. Obi tells Mobius that there is nothing they can do, and Mobius starts to hoof it back to base. Back with Loki, he notices the ringing phone and sees someone is trying to open the elevator next to it. He takes a gander and lo and behold, it's Sylvie. Loki starts to tear up, thinking he would finally have this show to himself, and then suddenly he gets pruned out of nowhere. In present time, Mobius is about to enter the base, but he hears something and turns around. Mobius sees that the extractor got a lock and pulls Loki from the time stream, and conveniently the extractor pulled Loki at the exact angle so that Loki could hit Mobius into the base right before the blast doors closed. Another non-surprising contrivance that happens to help our heroes. Upstairs in the TVA, we see that Dox and her team are taking a huge amount of TVA tech and weapons, and this brings a concerned look upon B-15's face, and the episode comes to a close. Oh, but before that, we finally do get to see Sylvie, and we get to see that Sylvie gets to enjoy the thing she's been wanting to this whole time, a McDonald's burger. Trust me, I can't wait to talk about this part. So episode 2 begins with Loki and Mobius in 1977 London on the search for Sylvie. They got a hit on a temp pad from X5, and since he was tasked to find Sylvie originally, they took this as a lead to find her here. They see that X5 appears to now be a movie star named Brad Wolfe, and is attending the premiere of his own movie Zodiac. Looks like X5 found out where his life was on the timeline and has decided to go ahead and get it back for himself. While Brad is greeting guests in the paparazzi, Mobius and Loki gets up with Brad to talk to him. Brad says he will grab them a drink and catch them up on what's going on, but instead Brad tries to run, so Mobius and Loki are now chasing him. Outside, B-15 confronts Brad and takes away his temp pad so he can't use it to escape. Brad continues to run and gets chased by Loki through many corridors and tunnels. Brad runs into a dead end and Loki seems to have him cornered, but Brad uses another device on him that appears to be a time looper twister thing from the first season. You know, I was originally going to criticize italicizes part because last I checked you needed that collar thing around your neck, but on rewatch I see he is wearing it on his wrist, so good on the showrunners for keeping this one piece of continuity. So Brad seems to have lost Loki, but gets cornered by a bunch of street peeps. He grabs a pipe and tries to hit one of them, but it is revealed that this is just an illusion played by Loki. Loki takes away the time looper device and gets X5 cornered and reprimanded. So, guess what? You're not going to believe this, but I am going to compliment the show. Yes, you heard right, I am actually going to give this show a compliment. If you've seen my critique of Season 1, you know that one of the major criticisms I had was Loki not using his powers in situations where he should. Particularly the fight with Sylvie. I mean, he uses it a little bit, but nowhere to the level he could and should, and there was no reason for him not doing so. Like, he only ever used telekinesis to grab a vacuum and then just uses random items found around in this store. Never once did he use any of the powers we know he has, such as illusions, the magic blast, magic stuff in general, none of that. This made him look lame and incompetent. But here he actually does use a variety of his powers, using the magic blast, illusions, multiple versions of himself, his shadow puppets, etc. So thank you, show, you managed to outdo your preceding season regarding this criticism by increasing Loki's competence a noticeable amount. At least for this scene. Let's see if you can keep this up for the rest of the season. So Brad is now captured and taken to an interrogation room. The rest of our heroes are tasked to take Brad's tempad down to OB because Brad seemed to have made some major modifications to the device. Down there they see that OB is working on a device to retrofit the temporal loom so it can handle all the new branches. OB gives them a handbook that can tell them about the tempad so that way they can find out for themselves and OB can prioritize fixing the loom and preventing a meltdown. B-15 meets with Casey and asks if they had a hit on Renslayer's tempad.
Why are you whispering?
It's a secret mission, right?
Renslayer killed C20, attempted to kill Mobius, threw me in time jail, and tried to take over the TVA. Why would tracking her tempad be a secret?
Right.
Right.
Well, that was cringe and pointless. Casey says they have had no luck finding Renslayer, but he was able to detect that the last message that was sent to Renslayer was from Miss Minutes. So Casey comes over to Mobius and Loki working on the modified tempad and tells them that Miss Minutes is helping Renslayer. This triggers Loki to remember that when he was in the past, he heard a recording between Renslayer and He Who Remains suggesting they were working together at one point. Casey says he will continue to search for them both and takes notice of what Loki and Mobius are working on. Casey says that while its modifications are unknown, it definitely does not block tracking. So Loki, Mobius, and B-15 decide to go interrogate Brad and ask him what the tempad does. Hey, guess what? I'm going to give this show one other small competent. Gasp! Yes!
You've got some nerve.
That being that compared to the first season, the comedy or attempts at humor are a little better in this season. Now, I am not saying every moment is comedic genius. There are some jokes that fall flat or are just unoriginal and too simple to be funny, like just a second ago. But there are some parts that give me a decent chuckle throughout the show, which is more than what I got out of season 1. So good on that, I guess. So while interrogating him, Brad very much gives them a sarcastic and condescending attitude. Loki tells Brad it should be in his interest to cooperate since there are lives at stake. With that comment, Brad starts to take a swing at Loki, saying that he has some nerve to say such a thing considering Loki's past of being a villain. Brad continues to lay into Loki, saying he only makes things worse for everyone, including his mother, because he is not a hero and only destined to be a villain. This gets under Loki's skin and Loki decides to make a comeback, although his comeback is honestly lame and not that good. He just basically says that maybe he'll just do some terrible things to Brad. Personally, I would have written Loki to say something along the lines of Brad also being a villain, that he pruned innocent timelines filled with countless lives for so long and he just went along with it, indicating to Brad he has done terrible things too, but unlike Brad, Loki knew what he was doing was bad, but Brad had no idea because he bought into the propaganda like a good little dog. And that once Brad realized what the TVA was doing, rather than try to stop it or make up for what he may have done, he just ran away to a selfish life of stardom. Something like that would have been way better than what Loki actually says here. Come on, writers, Loki can do better comebacks than this. So Mobius decides to take a crack at Brad and tells him if he helps them out, they will let him get back to his life on the timeline. Brad says to Mobius that he is not an analyst and that his real name is not even Mobius, that he is asleep and that deep down he is not wanting to accept the fact that the TVA has been a lie this whole time and that Mobius is blissfully ignorant. This makes Mobius snap and takes a punch at Brad. Mobius and Loki leave the room to let off some steam. They walk down into the lower levels where OB usually is and walk into a pie room. Okay, why is there just a random pie room down here? Is this just for the gag? Cause no one really comes down here, it's just OB, right?
It's just OB. It's just OB.
So this room does just exist for this gag? Okay. Also, looking at this shot, there is another question I have, that being, why are there clocks in the TVA? If this place is believed to be outside space and time, then why have clocks to keep track of time? Is this to keep track of how long your pie breaks are during shifts? So while eating delicious pies, Mobius admits that he did in fact lose his cool. Loki says it's okay, and he tries to relate to him.
You remember that time I went down to Earth and I held the whole of New York City hostage with an alien army? Let me say something. It wasn't tactical. Yeah. I lost it.
Okay, sorry to say, no, actually not sorry. I do not like how the tone of this scene is portrayed. Loki is talking about some of the terrible, awful things he has done in the past and is treated very casually and very comedically. I don't think this awkward, quiet, comedic tone fits. Loki also talks very awkwardly about it when I think a more serious tone and presentation would be more suited. Especially considering that in the last scene, Brad brought up Loki's past and it got Loki quite riled up. Now he's just kind of joking about the terrible things he has done and is talking about it like it has no leverage on him as a character. Personally, I think this scene maybe should have had a little more weight. So after that, Loki asks Mobius what they are going to do with Brad. Mobius says that Brad is very good at his job and probably did find Sylvie, but just won't admit it, and they need a new strategy to get him to talk. In the other room, we see that OB is still trying to stop the overloading of the temporal loom. He tries to input a code to open the blast door, but it is saying that they need the temporal aura of a particular individual to do so. You know, why is OB the only one working on stopping the meltdown? I know he's the only one who works down here in this department, but this is a potential meltdown of the entire TVA we are talking about. I am pretty sure there are people somewhere here in the entire TVA who would want to help, considering that if the loom fails, they will all die. That should be enough of a motivation for other TVA perps to help OB. So back in the world of Brad, Loki comes in for round 2, and this time has brought a machine which Brad seems to know is used for torture tactics. Loki says they are missing the controller for the device, so Mobius says they will be right back with it. Once Mobius exits the room, Loki closes and locks the door behind, keeping Mobius out. Okay, why would the TVA design a door that can be locked from inside the cell? What purpose does that serve? Now, I know people will say that it is revealed later that Mobius was just pretending that it is locked, but if that's the case, you would think Brad working here for a millennia would catch and point that out, or just curiously for himself try to open the door. Either way, this is a really contrived detail for the sake of making this next scene happen. Loki says that he wrote a little script of his own and reveals he has a controller. While setting up the device, Loki asks Brad again for Sylvie's location. Brad doesn't budge because he doesn't believe Loki knows how to work the device. Loki tells Brad that he's not trying to be a hero, just a villain. Loki pulls the cord to start up the device, which is a hilarious detail considering the technological advancement of the TVA, and now Brad is starting to worry. You know, Brad, if you really don't think Loki knows how to work this device, maybe you should tackle Loki and stop him before he finds out. Loki has no powers here, and you are a trained and skilled hunter, so you probably have a chance to take him out and stop him before he can start to use it. Also, Brad, you saw Loki lock the door from the inside. Why not try to go to the door and unlock it? Loki didn't use a key, he just used the handle, so why not try to do it yourself? It doesn't matter if the officers are outside, the point is to get out of the room Loki is in so he can't use the device on you. There are things you can do here, Brad. Come on, you're supposed to be a clever chap. So Loki uses the device on Brad and encloses him in a hard-shell jello cube from Cloudy with a chance of meatballs. Brad is now starting to freak out and Loki starts to use Brad's own words against him.
I don't know if you know this, but I've done some terrible, awful thing.
Loki continues to make the jello cube smaller to make Brad admit where Sylvie is. Brad gives in and says he will tell them where he found Sylvie. Mobius comes in and it is revealed that he was a part of this act all along. They take Brad out so Brad can show them where he found Sylvie. I will say that despite the poor logistics of this scene, it is nice to see Loki get the upper hand of Brad, unlike his unimpressive attempt earlier. But this does lead me into another question. Why was Brad so adamant about not telling our heroes where Sylvie is? Why did he not want to budge on this question? As far as I'm aware, all Brad wants is to live his life on the timeline. That is the whole reason he went dark initially. So if telling Mobius and Loki where Sylvie is will potentially give him his life back, why doesn't he just comply? To protect Sylvie? He doesn't care about Sylvie. In fact, it seems he has a negative outlook on her as shown later. And he is not doing this to stop the TVA. He knows what they do and what they are capable of, and yet still abandon the TVA to go live his life and told no one. It doesn't appear he cares about stopping any future horrors the TVA would do, and as we shall find out, will do. So again, with this in mind, why is he so insistent on not telling them about Sylvie? In what way is this beneficial to him other than giving him a catharsis feeling of talking back and ridiculing his captors? Back down in the loom basement, B-15 brings down Casey to see if Casey can be of assistance to OB. You think you could have brought down more people than just Casey, B-15? Come on now, this isn't some minor issue, this is the death of the entire TVA we are talking about. OB comes in yelling, saying they are all going to die. He explains to them that the blast doors are locked and that the only way to unlock them is a live scan of the temporal aura of He Who Remains, who is unfortunately dead. The only hope they have is to find Miss Minutes and see if she can override it. By the way, this scene is yet another instance of a serious moment and tone that is undercut by bad comedy.
You wrote the TVA guidebook. Will you sign mine for me?
Of course I will.
Oh my god, shut up. Back to Loki, Mobius, and Brad. They make a visit to a McDonald's where apparently Sylvie is. Inside, we see Sylvie is now a McDonald's employee on Earth in Braxton, Oklahoma in 1982?
Why?
Sylvie has completed her lifelong mission, taken out her mortal enemy, and finally no longer has to run or hide and can choose the life she wants. And she has a temp pad. She can literally go anywhere in space and time. And she chooses to become a worker at McDonald's in Oklahoma in 1982?
I don't buy it.
Why the hell, out of all possible options, would she choose here? Why wouldn't she go back to Asgard? I know her Asgard is gone, but why not visit this branch's Asgard? Wouldn't she be the least bit curious or interested to see at least somewhat of a representation of what her home was like? To see a glimpse of the place she was taken from at a very young age? Why the hell would she or anyone in this matter choose a McDonald's in the middle of nowhere in Oklahoma with the millions of options she literally has at her fingertips? I do not buy this at all. So Loki goes up to the counter and asks Sylvie if they could talk.
My break's in 5 minutes.
Well, that was convenient timing. So Loki and Sylvie head outside to her old Ford truck to talk. Nice choice of vehicle, Sylvie. The green is such an on-the-nose detail. Loki tells Sylvie that he was time-slipping between different times and that he was in the future and saw her at the TVA. And he wants to know if she is potentially planning something there. She says she has no intention of going back to the TVA and that she is perfectly happy where she is. Yeah, I don't buy that, but anyway. Loki emphasizes that if He Who Remains told them the truth, then the TVA may be the only defense in the oncoming war with the variants of He Who Remains. So, he needs her cooperation to prevent the TVA from being completely destroyed. Mobius and Brad are having a conversation on the inside, and it's honestly just comedic filler. It's okay, I guess, but this scene kinda serves no big relevance to the story. At least nothing other than Brad seemingly more tense and then Mobius coming to a sudden realization. Mobius and Brad go outside, and Brad tells them that if they stay here, everyone is going to die. Sylvie then enchants Brad to see what Dox and her crew are doing, as well as why they raided the armory. They are planning to prune every branch of the timeline, including the one that our heroes are on right now. So with that information now known, Brad, why the hell would you not want to share that info? This is what you are tense about this entire time? Why would you not tell them? What is the point of withholding that info? The longer you withhold it, the more probable it is you and everyone here will die. And considering they are going to bomb every branch and kill everyone on it, why wouldn't you want to tell anyone of this plan to save other people's lives as well? You know, people who have lives just like the one you just got yourself? This is such a stupid decision on Brad's part. It makes no sense. There is also one other thing I would like to point out. I originally had in here another reason that Brad would want to tell our heroes about Dox's plan to save his branch from being pruned. Except for I realized on rewatch that in the beginning of this episode that Brad is on the sacred timeline and not a branch timeline. While this may be used as a defense, it creates more problems. Firstly, Brad is a variant. That has been clearly established, which means that there is no place for him on the sacred timeline, which is what Miss Minutes states in the first season.
Now that your actions have left you without a place on the timeline, you must stand trial for your offenses.
So if that's the case, how is he able to live on the sacred timeline without creating branches? There is no place he can live on there without creating a branch. That is why he was pulled from the timeline in the first place. It is a contradiction that Brad, a variant, is able to live on the sacred timeline without creating a branch based on the entirety of the world building the show has given us. Back at the TVA, the crew notices that branches are starting to become pruned. Also, they are able to prune branches even though they are past redline, so I guess that that is a lie or now just a thrown away rule. Mobius, Loki, and Sylvie go to where Dox and her crew are located. Very convenient, they opened a time door at this hiding spot and not out in the open to get instantly spotted. But even more than that, this is not really a hiding spot. Their heads are poking out and I am surprised not a single hunter spots them. But even more than that, why are y'all hiding? They are bombing timelines, killing billions of people. There is no time to hide and think. Take them out ASAP. So our three heroes take down Dox's crew, with Sylvie and Loki implementing the same power they used to defeat Goliath, by interlocking their hands. Yay! So they arrest Dox and what is left of her crew, and our heroes head back to the TVA to see the major damage that Doc's crew did to the timeline. Damn, how the hell did she manage to accomplish that in such a short amount of time? So Sylvie is not happy with the situation and tells Loki that the TVA is the problem, not the solution. With that, she leaves Loki and uses her temp pad to go back home. And now everyone is left in distraught as to what transpired, and that is where episode 2 ends. Wait, what? This episode is called Breaking Brad? Really? This is starting to become a noticeable thing in Disney Plus content now. Okay, well that's gonna do for part 1. This part was honestly shorter than I thought it would be. So, what are my general impressions of the show so far? Well, unsurprisingly, it still has a lot of nonsensical plot elements, contradictions that collide with season 1, and broken mechanics. I wasn't expecting that to get much better, and so far it seems to be the case. But compared to season 1, there are some things I do think they did a bit to improve on, even if it's just a little. To start, Loki is portrayed to be a bit more competent rather than an outright buffoon, as highlighted in the scenes with Brad. He also seems to be more the focus of the show now rather than Sylvie, which is a welcome change for me. Along with that, the comedy in this I do find give me some chuckles, at least some more than season 1, like the scene in the elevator or when the car crashes into the office, and some other bits as well. But not every joke is like that, and some jokes do fall flat, like the one with Casey and B-15, or that pie scene, or that whole cringe exchange between Casey and Obi. There are some editing and cinematography choices that I liked and appreciated, including the scene in Obi's office when Loki is in the past and Mobius is in the present. I like some of the long symmetrical shots or zoom-in shots that were used. So yes, I do think I like season 2 a little more than season 1, so far at least. But so far, I would say this show is still not good. I have a bad feeling it might get worse from here, so let's hope it does not. There are more things I could say, but I plan to say those things after I have gone through all the episodes. So let us cross our fingers and toes that the show will either maintain the quality or get better. But perhaps that's not the show's destiny on the sacred timeline. I guess we're gonna have to find out next video. Until then, thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.